It was almost 2 in the morning when Marcus Whitmore sat alone in his home office, the blue glow of his laptop screen illuminating the hard lines of his face, and as he rewound the footage for the 4th time that night, his jaw tightened because something about what he was seeing didn't make sense. Something about the way his golden retriever Max was behaving when no one was home felt suspicious, felt wrong, and he leaned closer to the screen, his finger hovering over the trackpad as he whispered to himself in the quiet darkness, "What are you doing when I'm not home?" And in that moment, watching his dog pace across the living room on the grainy security footage, Marcus felt a knot forming in his stomach because he had installed these cameras 3 days ago expecting to catch destruction, expecting to find torn cushions and scratched doors and evidence of the chaos he assumed was happening behind closed doors. But instead he was seeing something else entirely, something he couldn't yet explain, and he needed to understand what was really going on because this dog, this animal he had trusted with his children, was acting in ways that made absolutely no sense to him. Now to understand how Marcus ended up here, watching hidden camera footage at 2 in the morning with suspicion clouding his mind, you need to know who Marcus Whitmore actually was, and the truth is he was exactly the kind of man whose life looked perfect from the outside, a self-made billionaire who had built his tech empire from nothing. A man who owned a stunning 12,000 square foot smart home in an exclusive gated community just outside of Boston, a man who had every luxury money could buy, but also a man who was rarely home, whose schedule was packed with board meetings and investor calls and international flights, and the one thing that kept his heart grounded, the one thing that reminded him why he worked so hard, was his 2 children, 8-year-old Emma and 6-year-old Noah. And those kids adored their dog Max, a 4-year-old golden retriever who had been part of the family since he was a puppy, and for years Marcus had seen Max as nothing more than a family pet. A companion for the kids, something soft and warm for them to hug when their father was away on business, but lately, over the past few weeks, things had started to feel different. It started with small things that Marcus noticed whenever he was actually home, like the way certain objects in the house seemed to have moved. Pillows shifted on the couch, rugs bunched up near doorways, chairs slightly out of place, and at first he assumed the housekeeper was just rearranging things, but then he noticed how exhausted Max seemed every evening, how the dog would barely lift his head when Marcus walked through the door. And that was strange because Max had always been energetic. Always been the first to greet anyone who came home, and then there was the behavior that really caught Marcus's attention, the way Max would act strangely every morning when Marcus left for work. The way the dog would stand at the window watching the car pull away with an intensity that felt almost desperate, and Marcus started to wonder if something was wrong, if maybe the dog was developing behavioral problems, if maybe Max was tearing up the house during the day and exhausting himself in the process, and that thought, that suspicion, planted a seed in Marcus's mind that he couldn't shake, and so 3 days ago he made a decision that felt practical at the time. He installed hidden cameras throughout the house, small discreet devices that the kids wouldn't notice, that the housekeeper wouldn't question, and he told himself he was doing it to protect his home, to confirm his doubts, to catch whatever destructive behavior was happening when no one was watching, but deep down there was something else driving him, a quiet mistrust that he didn't want to admit, a feeling that this dog he had welcomed into his family might not be what he seemed. The first day of footage showed nothing remarkable, just Max lying in his bed near the living room window, occasionally getting up to drink water, occasionally wandering to the kitchen, and Marcus watched it on fast forward, waiting for the moment when the destruction would begin, but it never came, and he told himself to be patient, told himself to keep watching, and on the second day he noticed something small, something he almost missed because he was watching too quickly, and it was the way Max kept pacing near the hallway that led to the children's bedrooms. Back and forth, like he was checking on something, like he was making sure everything was okay, and Marcus paused the footage and rewound it and watched it again, and he felt a flicker of confusion because this wasn't the behavior of a dog being destructive, this was the behavior of a dog being vigilant, and then he noticed something else, something that made him set down his coffee cup and lean closer to the screen, and it was the way Max would sit by the front door for hours. Not scratching, not whining, just sitting there with his ears perked up, listening to sounds that the cameras couldn't capture, reacting to things that no one else in the empty house could hear, and there was this one moment, this brief 5-second clip, where Max suddenly stood up and stared at the front door with an intensity that sent a chill down Marcus's spine, and then just as quickly the dog relaxed and walked away. And Marcus found himself wondering what Max had heard, what invisible threat had triggered that response, and the confusion he felt was starting to shift into something else, something that felt almost like curiosity. Over the next few nights, Marcus found himself staying up late, reviewing more and more footage, going back further, watching clips from different rooms, and the patterns he discovered were unlike anything he had expected, and he saw Max checking windows throughout the day, moving from room to room, pausing at each window like he was scanning for something outside. And he saw Max sleeping in the hallway outside the children's bedrooms instead of in his comfortable dog bed downstairs, choosing the hard floor over soft cushions because that position gave him a clear view of both bedroom doors, and he saw something that stopped his heart for just a moment, a clip of Noah running down the stairs too fast, his little feet moving carelessly on the hardwood steps, and there was Max, appearing out of nowhere, positioning his body at the bottom of the stairs, blocking Noah's path just enough to slow him down, just enough to prevent a fall that could have ended badly. And Marcus watched that clip 5 times, and each time he noticed something new, the way Max's eyes tracked Noah's movements, the way the dog seemed to know exactly where to stand, the way he guided the boy to safety without making a sound, and Marcus felt something shifting inside his chest, something he couldn't name yet, because this wasn't bad behavior, this wasn't destruction, this was something else entirely, and he kept watching because he needed to understand what he was seeing. It was the footage from last Thursday night that changed everything, and Marcus almost missed it because he was tired, because his eyes were strained from hours of staring at the screen, but something made him pause, something made him rewind, and what he saw in that footage would stay with him for the rest of his life, because at 2:47 in the morning, while the entire house was asleep, while Marcus was in a hotel room across the country closing a business deal, while Emma and Noah were tucked safely in their beds, a shadow moved across the backyard camera, a figure approaching the fence line, moving slowly, deliberately, testing the gate, checking for weaknesses, and Marcus felt his blood run cold as he watched, as he realized that someone had been casing his home, someone had been looking for a way in, but then he saw Max, and the dog was already awake, already standing at the back door, his body rigid, his attention locked on the figure in the darkness, and Max didn't bark loudly, didn't create chaos that would wake the children and frighten them. Instead, the dog let out a low, continuous growl that seemed to vibrate through the glass door, and then Max did something that made Marcus's hand start to shake. The dog turned and walked calmly through the house, checking each door, each window, positioning himself at the base of the stairs that led to the children's bedrooms, and he stood there, alert, protective, until the shadow outside retreated, until the figure disappeared into the night, and only then did Max relax, only then did he lie down at the bottom of those stairs, keeping watch until morning, and Marcus realized with sudden devastating clarity that his children had been in danger that night, real danger, the kind of danger that could have ended in tragedy, and they never knew, and their mother never knew, and Marcus never knew, but Max knew. Max had known all along, and that dog had stood between his children and whatever threat was lurking in the darkness, and Marcus felt tears forming in his eyes as he sat there in his office, because he finally understood what he had been watching all these nights. He finally understood what Max had been doing every single day when no one was watching. He went back through all the footage, every clip he had dismissed, every moment he had misunderstood, and it all made sense now. The pacing near the children's rooms wasn't anxiety, it was patrol. The sitting by the door wasn't loneliness, it was guard duty. The exhaustion every evening wasn't from destruction, it was from the endless vigilance of an animal who had appointed himself protector of the most precious things in that house. And Marcus thought about all the times he had scolded Max for being in the way, all the times he had pushed past the dog without a second thought, all the times he had questioned whether keeping a pet was worth the hassle, and he felt shame rising in his throat, a hot bitter shame that made him want to look away from the screen, but he couldn't look away. He had to see all of it, he had to understand the full depth of what Max had been doing. And there was another clip, from 2 weeks ago, showing Max in Noah's room at 3 in the morning, and the dog was nudging the boy gently, persistently, pushing his nose against Noah's arm until the child stirred, and at first Marcus couldn't understand why, but then he noticed it. The window in Noah's room was cracked open, and the temperature had dropped suddenly that night, and Noah was shivering in his sleep, too young to wake up on his own, too small to know he needed another blanket, but Max knew. Max had sensed it somehow, and the dog kept nudging until Noah woke up just enough to pull his covers tighter, and then Max curled up on the floor beside the bed, adding his own warmth to the room, staying there until morning. And Marcus had to pause the footage because he couldn't see through his tears, because he was realizing that this dog, this animal he had doubted, had been loving his children in ways that Marcus himself had failed to notice, had been filling the gaps left by a father who was always away, always busy, always distracted by the next deal, the next meeting, the next flight out of town. Marcus sat in his dark office for a long time after that. The footage paused on his screen, his hands folded in his lap, and he let himself feel the full weight of what he had discovered. And it wasn't just guilt, though there was plenty of that. It was something deeper, something that felt like gratitude mixed with grief, gratitude for Max's loyalty and grief for all the time he had wasted not seeing it, not appreciating it, not understanding that the best guardian his children had was right there in front of him, for legs and a wagging tail and a heart bigger than Marcus had ever given him credit for, and he whispered into the empty room, his voice cracking slightly, "I didn't see it, but you did," and he meant all of it, the danger and the cold and the moments when his children needed protection and he wasn't there. Max had seen it all, Max had responded to it all, Max had kept those kids safe while their father was building his empire, and Marcus felt something break inside his chest. Not a painful break, but the kind of breaking that happens when walls come down, when defenses crumble, when a person finally lets themselves feel what they've been avoiding, and he cried quietly in that office, not dramatic sobs, just the silent tears of a man realizing he had almost missed something beautiful, because he was too busy looking for something ugly. The next morning, Marcus didn't rush out the door like he usually did. He didn't bark orders into his phone while gulping down coffee. Instead, he walked slowly through his house, watching his children eat their breakfast, watching Emma give Max a piece of her toast, watching Noah hug the dog's neck and whisper something in his ear. And when the kids ran off to get ready for school, Marcus knelt down on the kitchen floor, something he hadn't done in longer than he could remember, and he looked at Max, really looked at him, at the grey starting to show on his muzzle, at the gentle patience in his brown eyes, at the way his tail wagged softly, uncertain, like he wasn't sure if he was in trouble or not. And Marcus didn't give a big speech, didn't try to explain or apologize. He just reached out and scratched behind Max's ears, gently, slowly, with a tenderness he hadn't shown in years, and Max leaned into his hand. And they stayed like that for a long moment, and when Emma came back into the kitchen and saw her father on the floor with their dog, she ran over and wrapped her arms around both of them, and Noah followed. And for one perfect morning, Marcus Whitmore wasn't a billionaire or a CEO or a man with a packed schedule. He was just a father who had finally opened his eyes, and he held his children and their loyal dog, and he made a silent promise to himself that things were going to change. In the weeks that followed, Marcus started leaving his office earlier, started taking fewer overnight trips, started paying attention to the small moments he had always missed before, and he noticed how Max would greet the children at the door every day, how the dog's whole body would wiggle with joy when Emma and Noah came home from school, and he noticed how Max still did his patrols, still checked the windows, still slept outside the children's bedrooms. But now there was someone watching who appreciated it, someone who understood the sacrifice behind that loyalty, and Marcus had the old hidden cameras removed, but he installed new ones, not to spy, not to catch bad behavior, but to capture the moments he might miss when he was away, to have a record of Max's devotion, to remind himself why loyalty and presence mattered more than any business deal he would ever close. And sometimes late at night, Marcus would watch the footage of Max guarding his children, and he would feel that same swell of emotion in his chest, and he would whisper thank you to the screen, knowing that Max couldn't hear him, but needing to say it anyway, because some debts of gratitude are too big to keep silent. And the truth that Marcus learned through those hidden cameras wasn't about a dog misbehaving, it was about a dog loving, completely and unconditionally, in the quiet hours when no one was supposed to be watching. And that truth changed Marcus in ways he couldn't have predicted, made him softer, made him more present, made him understand that the most important things in life aren't the ones you build with money and strategy, they're the ones you nurture with time and attention and the willingness to finally see what's been in front of you all along. Have you ever discovered that someone was protecting you when you didn't even realize it? Someone who showed up for you in ways you never noticed until you finally stopped to look. If that's ever happened to you, take a moment and share your story in the comments, because sometimes the guardians in our lives aren't the ones wearing capes or carrying titles. Sometimes they're the quiet ones who love us without ever asking for recognition. And if this story touched something in your heart, share it with someone who believes that true loyalty deserves to be seen, deserves to be honored, deserves to be remembered, because in a world that moves too fast, we all need reminders that the most faithful love often comes without words, without fanfare, without asking for anything in return.